Welcome back, Josh. It has been an incredibly long time, possibly too long, but we are back in the game with the Modern Game podcast. Start the new year off with a bang, and what better topic to talk about than capped mode, which will be with us in less than a month.
Not long now.
Yeah, not long at all. I think I've started to think about it more in the last couple of weeks, and I do admit I did buy a couple of players that I hope will be useful for Cat, but I'd like to start off by sort of highlighting an observation that I've seen, which I actually find really, really interesting when it comes to Cat mode, is that I'm seeing quite a few people share their threshold teams on Twitter, and I fear that there's quite a lot of people out there that haven't really fundamentally understood the difference between old threshold and the new way of winning threshold in capped. Just a quick summary for anyone listening today that hasn't dove into the rules and regs when it comes to the new capped mode 240 is that it's taking cues from basketball. That I've been playing that game. Like, I haven't invested in basketball, but I have been playing the common game just to sort of get in the sort of swing of playing these capped modes. But what's the interesting thing about it is that you have a maximum points allocation that you can spend, and that is 240 points. And you essentially won't win a prize, any prize, either the threshold or otherwise, if you don't go above 250. So, by the very composition of that rule set, you are only going to win if your players outperform their L15. Indeed. Which is just so different to threshold before, because threshold before was like you just wanted players like Max Kakare was like a great example of it, albeit under 23. The players that just never really do anything, like they're between like 52 and 58 every game, and it's just like if you look on their server data chart, it's just a line of green in the middle of the page. Like those were the absolute perfect players for old threshold. I'll say it now, they will be absolutely useless. Right? And it's what's been quite interesting is I've seen so many people sharing their threshold teams for capped, and then this person's, I can get this team in under 240, and it's like, okay, you can do that now
for 1 week.
For 1 week, maybe not even 1 week, because they're 240 at the beginning of January. They might not be 240 at the end of January, and it sort of fundamentally overlooks like this game. You only win if you outperform your L15. So if you manage to pick a bunch of players that are really, really good, and you've maybe got people coming back from injury, or you think that the prospects over the next bunch of games are much better than their last 15, then that's brilliant. But that will only last you for a couple of weeks at best, and then the cap of your team is likely, the L15 of your team is likely to exceed the 240 cap. So I've seen a lot of people being like, here's my threshold team. And I'm like, okay, well, that's only 5 players. Like, that's not going to last you at all. Like, the way, for me, this is all about depth and matchups and, bringing in players that, you used to wouldn't touch with a barge pole, Denzel Dumfries. But now, in a spot where you think Dumfries has got a really good fixture, like into Spezia or something like that, suddenly Dumfries is, going to, the chances of him outperforming his L15 is really high. But those type of players have really high variance, and in order to outperform their L15 some weeks, they're going to have to significantly underperform their L15 in others. So I'd love to get your thoughts on it. For me, I just think that the depth factor of being able to challenge for threshold at any level for a concerted period of time, it just seems to be massively overlooked. Or maybe I'm just following a bunch of morons on Twitter. Who knows?
No, I've also seen a few people post their new threshold lineups, and I think it's just completely flawed logic, isn't it? Either your team does really well, like you say, and then after a game or 2 games, they've exceeded 240 cap and you can't use them anymore, or they don't do they hit their L15s and you don't win any prizes. So I think you are going to have to be forever adjusting and adding new pieces to your threshold chasing lineups in order to semi consistently beat the 250 score, because it's not going to be easy. I think it's going to be tricky, right? And I think one thing we'll probably talk about a little later is like the cheat codes, the L15 DMPs that are now going to return, which I think is going to be if you're going to want to win anything in cap mode, in well, especially limited, but probably in rare modes as well, you're going to need at least one of those guys in your lineup each week,
Absolutely.
because it just frees you up for a lot more space, doesn't it? If you're only having to make 240 points out of 4 players instead of out of 5, that's a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
You can have 4 L4 L15 60s and then 1 L15 0. That sort of lineup would probably win you a decent card in All-Star, maybe, or whatever. So
well, you and I, mate, mark our calendars for the week that Nico Mantle gets his first start in
right?
many games, because if like you say there, like he's going to take a 0-point cap hit on your team. So then you can put a DMP, like DMP over the last 15, like he's going to play the first game for Aalborg.
Yep.
You're using 0 points. If he keeps a clean sheet, you're plus 60 on your cap average. Like, which is just going to be massive. And then if your other 4 players end up putting up a big score, then you've got to be in the mix. Like, what I'm really, really interested to see is like, what is the points total that wins capped?
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be bigger than what people expect or what we expect, for sure.
Yes, it is. But then I think what's also interesting as well is you've got no captain, no scarcity bonuses. So what I'm really interested to see is what the score required to win is, because there's no captain bonus, no XP. So it really is getting that edge, getting those couple of extra points from here, getting upside from players that maybe have a low L15 is going to be massive. And like you said, those players that are coming back from injury, are maybe had a transfer and they've gone from being a backup to a starter, particularly in the context of goalkeeper, is going to be huge. And like you have to just say now is, you're not going to win. If there's a week where, Nico Mantle, for example, if there's a week where Nico Mantle's going to play and he's a 0-point cap hit, if you don't play Mantle, the chances of you winning is I think close to 0.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of variables here for me around, what are the prizes? We know that if you get to 250 points, you hit the threshold at the different scarcities. But we also know that So Rare now have all the prizes that they used to give in Specialist and Underdog available to move into capped. Mm-hmm. And my sort of expectation is that they are moving those in. So, there's potentially quite a few prizes available. The challenge then becomes is, how much do you try and trade in and out to maintain those big hitting teams? Because if you look at basketball, when you see the projections and there's a guy who's got like maybe an L10 of like 2 and he's projected 20, like people pile into that like you don't believe, and like the spikes, like players can like 4 or 5x within a week. And then you've got a decision to make of like, are you going to go and play with that player? Because if you don't, the chances of you winning is really low, because that's like the player of the week. But then if you do play it and you don't win because your other 4 players don't hit, then you're probably going to be left holding the bag on a player that's, not going to reach that same sort of value again for a while. It creates these really sort of unsustainable spikes in value. And I think that, the way that I've tried to approach this is I'm like, yes, I want some of those players, but at the same time, I want to try and get players that I could use in other teams afterwards, particularly in Super Rare, because I was like, I don't want to, like, the liquidity in the lower scarcity cards is inherently lower, and it might be a challenge to resell stuff afterwards. So like, I grabbed Kofi, for example, And the way I sort of looked at it is Kofi's at this moment in time, he's got an L15 of 39. By the time Cap Road comes around, he's probably not going to be 39. You know, it might be low 40s. Sure. That's still under the average. You need to basically maintain like mid to upper 40s average per card each week to regularly play specialist. Regularly play Cap. But I felt like he was a useful signing because, you know, I could use him in Challenger afterwards. And I'd be quite happy using him in Challenger afterwards. But what I think is, you know, potentially a risky strategy is, you know, trying to jump in on these sort of meta players each week if you don't have a spot to use them afterwards. Because then it becomes like, you know, if you've got a budget to spend, whatever budget that is, you do risk potentially diluting the strength of your normal teams because you're chasing threshold. And I just think that you're going to have to constantly refresh that. Like the way I'm looking at it is I've got a couple of players that I think have got a really low L15 that could be useful for capped. And my intention is to try and use them for as long as I can. But I'm still realistically, I'm probably going to have to be trading in and out of 1 or 2 players a week if I want to try and maintain capped and be competitive, which then, yes, you can do that in limited quite easy because, you know, you can sell and you can make that call of like, okay, well, if I buy this player and then maybe I can resell it for X, I bought it for Y, then my delta is this, and then I'll actually, you know, if I can win a prize, then it makes sense. But, you know, what I'm really intrigued about is your approach to the different scarcities, because I know you're someone as well that has a lot of super rare cards. You know, I've not actually bought many super rares for this, but I did look at my gallery and I'm like, I've got a lot of quite stinky super rares that I've been holding on for quite a while that might actually be useful now. You know, like one player, for example, like Aaron Long, like he was absolutely abysmal at Red Bulls last season because Red Bulls under Struber were just playing long ball football and he just got killed by possession loss every game. But it looks like he's going to LAFC now. So suddenly, like, you know, he was someone that I may have tried to offload at the beginning of the MLS season, but now I'm looking at him and going, you've got a really trash L15, and the likelihood of you outperforming that at a new club is quite useful. So then he becomes, I think, you know, maybe for 5-6 games, becomes someone that could be quite useful for me in Threshold Super Rare. But I'd be really intrigued because I think, you know, you've got, you know, even more super rares than myself. Like, I'd love to know how you're thinking of approaching the different scarcities and sort of, you know, will you target capped in super rare or will you continue to focus on D2?
Yeah, okay. So I think without seeing the prize pool, I don't know if I'm going to play limited capped mode. I think probably I will not because it probably won't make too much sense to, like, I'll probably end up with a load of limited cards and a load of bad limited cards, and then I'll just like lob a lineup in capped mode each week. It probably won't hit the cap each week, and I'll probably be like a losing limited cap mode player, right? I'll just build a lineup and then I'll like maybe win a couple of cards or maybe hit the cap a couple of times, but then struggle to sell the players and end up with them being less valuable than when I bought them, basically, is where I think it will probably happen. Unless just because I probably won't put as much time into the limited mode as I will the others, right?
Unless as soon as they got star rares in the prize pool,
right,
you're back in.
Exactly, right. So if there are star rares in the prize pool, I guess even just for the podium, I probably will play it reasonably seriously and dedicate a reasonable amount of time for it, just because the outlay likely to build a competitive lineup is probably going to be pretty low compared to what the potential price could be. You know, if you're hitting a star rare in limited caps, you can probably stick a team together. You know, even if you know, say for that first week you do need a Nico Mantle or another, you know, L15-0, that card in limited is still only going to be worth, you know, probably like 0.05, 0.1 max, right? And a star rare could potentially be 1/8. So you probably stick a, you know, worst case scenario, stick a very competitive specialist cap limited mode together team for like 0.2, like absolute worst case scenario, and then your potential prize is obviously going to be quite bigger. And yeah, obviously if you don't win, then you're probably left holding the bag. But like you say, you can always recycle those players into other modes, or
and I think, you know, as well,
another spike.
I think that the way that the cap is set up, and this is probably going to get us a lot of hate from limited fans out there, but the way that cap is set up, I think it's easier for someone like us to compete on a small budget, knowing the game, knowing how the scores go, and saying, you know what, I'm just going to buy a team for 1 week, than specialist, where in specialist you needed that big
Mega
over
card.
60-point player. You needed that Messi, that Neymar type, which I just had no intention of ever buying in limited because I didn't seriously compete in limited. Whereas now it's not about that. Like you won't need those cards. You won't be able to use those cards without significantly compromising on the rest of your squad. So I think that it actually, although it's more difficult to hit every week, it makes it easier for players that are not competing at that level to trade in and out of, but exclusively at limited. Because I think like trading in and out at rares and super rares is not a valuable strategy, or not a viable strategy, and you'll be left holding the bag on those.
Yeah.
But I think in capped limited, I've grabbed a couple of players that I think could be useful. And the only reason I've done that is because I had a couple of goalkeepers like Kofi and Stuver at Austin FC who are quite low L15 and could be useful in capped. And I was like, oh, you know what? Like I'll throw a couple more quid at this, and I'll get a couple of players that I think could be useful. But I think I will. The reason I've done that is because I will make that call on how seriously I take it, much like you. Once I see the prize pool, but if it's just like competing for was it $5 worth of ETH a week, and there's no like big upside in it, I'll probably just leave it and focus on the highest density. Just focus on being strong in the divisions that I play normally, because like you said, otherwise you're going to be end up having to spend a load of time trading in and out, and likely end up holding stuff that will be worth less than you paid for it if you try to buy in the week before. And the challenge is you're going to have to buy in the week before a lot of the time, because you can't predict what a player's L15 is going to be 4 weeks into the future.
Exactly.
You can grab a couple of players. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there's Nico Mantle, there's Joao Paulo, who's coming back from an ACL in Seattle in the MLS. They don't have a game before cap mode starts. So whatever is the first week that Joao Paulo's back in the squad, he's going to be the meta because he's capable of hitting 60+ points in that side. There's what's the word? Jack Price as well at Colorado. There's a bunch of these like MLS guys that are coming back from fairly long-term injuries that could be really useful, but they're only going to be useful for 1 week.
Yes. Because
then their L15 can reset, because it's calculated based on the average of the games played, not the average of 15. And they become really unsustainable. So then what I've looked at is players that have just been like the ones that have the longest like shelf life. And there's a weird way to describe it, but the ones that have the longest shelf life are the ones that have just been riding the bench for like months.
Yeah.
Like Maximiliano Romero at Racing. Capetti's just gone to MLS to Charlotte, and Romero is expected to replace him as the number 9. In his last 15, I think he's got like 13 sub appearances of like sub 30 scores, 1 goal and 1 DMP. Right. Like, that is perfect, because it's going to, even if he goes on a run of smacking a load of goals, it's going to take ages for his L15 to drag up. So I think those type of players are really, really useful. And that's like, if you're trying to forecast and you're trying to play ahead, those guys could be quite useful, but you'll only be able to do that with 2 or 3 max players.
Yeah.
You're still going to need to be reactive, and you're still going to need to fill a team in the week of the the week that you want to play. Knowing that, what is your max 240 cap, who can you fit in there, who's got a good fixture. And those are the ones that are just going to be like, because there will be one, right? Every week there's going to be like 1 or 2 players that everyone's like, oh, you've got to get this guy. If you don't get that guy, you're not going to win. And then the demand on those players is just going to go. Boop.
If the prices are good,
if the prices are good, yeah.
Which I'm almost assuming they are going to be rewarded star rares there, just to get that like hype into the market for the limited cards.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it would be I feel like this would have been a really good opportunity to sort of cleanly separate it, because the question I have is, if limited is rewarding star rares, is rare rewarding star super rares? Is super rare rewarding star uniques? Like, it doesn't scale up effectively. Whereas if it was limited, you 1-star limiteds, rare you could win some top rares, super rare you could win some top super rares. It makes it it makes more sense, and it helps you strengthen at the scarcity you're playing at. Because I think, honestly, like the progression aspect that this was pitched as is a bit of a fallacy, because everyone that I saw hit big on limited, like people that are winning Messi with a 34 quid team, they just sold it and took that money straight out. Like very few people I saw and went, you know what? Yes, I've won a Messi. I'm going to now build a PSG stack. Like it just didn't happen. Like people were just like getting lucky in 1 week, rinsing a ridiculous ROI for 1 week. And I'd love to actually. This is obviously my perception. I'd love to see some data to understand like, did anyone that won big on Specialist Limited actually progress? Because I think it just warps everything otherwise, right? And it ends up dragging players like us down rather than encouraging us to stay at rare and super rare and leave like limited. Because limited cap should be like the foothold, like the stepping stone into the game, right? It's where you can play affordably.
Win a bit of cash.
Yeah. So I'm just intrigued to know what they do there. But there's a lot of vocal limited managers out there who'll probably kick up a right fuss if the star rare gets taken out.
I think what I think would be perfect is if they had, obviously, like you limiteds win limiteds and whatever, but the podium or the top 10, the top 20, whatever, get tier 3 or 2 rare cards. Because then you win enough of them, you have got, and those tier 3 and 2s aren't going to have outrageous L15s. You win enough of those, you can then step up to cap rare, and that and you maybe got like a 3 or 4 bits of a team there with the prizes you've won. You don't have to make such a big outlay. So I think that would be like the most. And again, like you can do that with rare because the supply constraint at super rare. The reason we can't get tier 0 super rares in the rare one is because there isn't enough supply of tier 0 super rare. So again, you could do that at rare level. Top rare wins, get your star rare, and then your tier 2 or tier 3 super rares on top, and do that sort of double. I've never really been a fan of the double card wins, but I think in the cap modes where you're supposed to be like encouraging progression, rewarding top tier of the higher scarcity doesn't work because, like you say, people are just like, wow, I've won this card, it's worth $5,000, I'm just going to sell it and take some money out or whatever and try and do it again. But if you stagger it like that, it works.
I think as well as it warps it because. Say, for example, the reason Specialist was like rare, for example, was so trash, was there was maybe like 1 tier 1 super rare, and then a couple of tier 2 super rares, and then because they didn't want to mix the scarcities of the same tiering because it would cause some weird, hang on a minute, I got a tier 2 rare that was worth more than that tier 2 super rare. Right. The next down, like when they went like 2 scarcity prizes in the same division, it would go like tier 1 super rare, tier 2 super rare, tier 3 rare.
Yep.
Rather than having like tier 2 rares. Yep. So it just ended up creating this, like at the higher levels, it created this really warped prizing structure, which just meant that most people were like, I can't be asked. I'm not like the chances of me winning the one good prize in Specialist Rare this week is so unlikely that I'm not going to do it because otherwise you're going to end up like holding it down. But I think that like the way that cap mode works, what you've suggested there makes so much sense because also as well they're putting prizes of 2 competitions into 1.
Yep.
As well, right?
Exactly.
So for underdog and specialist price allocations that are now go, in theory should go into cap 240.
Yep.
And if they were just restructure it in that way, then you are essentially you are facilitating progression in 2 ways. Is you can facilitate progression from someone going from like cap 240 limited to limited all star, which you could consider if you want a star or a T1 limited. And then you're giving lower tier rares that allow that person to consider capped 240 in rare.
Right.
I just think like the jump from a very low budget limited team winning a star rare is just so huge that it just ends up creating like warped incentives and sort of piles a load of people down into limited, where actually it might be better for onboarding new users if they want a bunch of us more experienced players that were essentially pushing down because we can see that the ROI there is just ridiculous compared to any other level.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Question is, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the way I was approaching the other scarcities. I think with so the other ones, the ones I definitely am going to play are rare and super rare. Like you say, I've got too many super rare cards basically, and this I'm hoping will help. Actually, that's not. I guess I have too many bad super rare cards. Is what I mean. So I think So I think this will help a lot. I mean, the one I was really excited about is Zakaria Labiad is training with Utrecht, who he was at before he went to Ajax under Ten Hag also. So he's coming back off an ACL, but if he's got he'll be the 1 week wonder, 1 week where to be honest, I don't really imagine him to do great, but he will definitely outperform Zero, obviously, if he starts for Utrecht. So yeah, I've got his super rare, and then a number of others actually. Albert Valchi's just got a bit of an upgrade. He's playing for Luzern in Switzerland currently, who are not a very good team, but Guindo's just been recalled to Salzburg, so I'm expecting Valchi to now play left back, which I think will probably be better than his situation. He's been on the bench quite a lot, but I think he'll probably be the starting left back now, so that's handy. And then I guess we have to see if Zuba lands anywhere as well. From my super rare perspective, if he goes back to Russia, that could be quite tasty. I've got a number of of poor super rare cards that could be coming into a bit more form than they have been. So at least for the first couple of weeks, I will have some semi decent lineups there, or might even be able to sell them. And then the rare one, I'm basically just building lots of depth, because I think that's just going to be the key, really. Just to in and out of matchups and home and away. I saw Economist put up a tweet about home and away fixtures in Cat, which I thought was interesting. Just like some players really do outperform home and away.
Yeah, they do.
And
MLS as well.
Such a big thing.
MLS is like the league for home field advantage. I remember seeing something crazy. Like, I think like in Europe, typically the home team wins like between like 38 and 40% of the time, whereas in MLS it's like 56%. Like it was huge. Like the advantage in MLS, like the home advantage, is just more so than any other league, because when you think about it, it's like Chelsea flying to St. Petersburg every week when they do an away game. Like the geography plays into that massively. So I definitely think that there's some use for MLS cards that on the home and away. The other one, which I think is really interesting, I've not seen anyone mention yet, but K-League. The K-League under 22 rule means that you get these random players that just sub in after 15 minutes.
Yeah.
If you've got a forward that is one of those like sub-in players, in the games they don't hit, you're getting like 25, 20. 27, 28 from them, right? And then if they do hit, they get 60. So those type of players, because consistently that they're always subbing in. Like I had one Sang of all Sang last year. And he was just like always the case for this, but he'd come off the bench after like 23 minutes and then hit a 90. So like it's those type of players I think are actually quite interesting for this. But obviously, the more they do that, the more they creep up. So, it's not like I've not seen there's not a sustainable like threshold strategy that allows you to play anywhere near the same players each week. It just doesn't. Like the whole fundamental of the way the game is designed is that can't really happen.
Yeah.
But I think the home and away is really, really nice. I think these like K-League specials that always sub in have definitely got value. And then I just think like these bench warmers. Like I went out, I grabbed a Maxi Romero rare and super rare. He's still under 23 until the summer. There's not that many great forwards in Argentina. So the way I sort of see him is like I think he's like low 30s L15 at the moment. And because he's got so many low scores in his 15, like even he'll stay low for a while. And what I mean low, I mean more than like 40, less than 45.
Right.
So I just think that there's so much use there. And then I've got so many Argentine players that in these odd weeks where it's just Argentina playing in America, then he's a really useful card to have, because I could put some quite strong lineups. Like
sure.
I've been having quite a bit of success recently with these odd weeks where it's like been just Belgium or just Ligue 1. I've been able to grab a couple of T1s in these weeks because my gallery is sort of built around like composites of teams in leagues, so that I know that if that league has a week where they're sort of one of the only ones in their region playing, then I can, really hit. So I've tried to sort of build around that, and particularly with super rare, I've only made, I think, 3 acquisitions for my capped squad. But the reason I sort of made the decision on that is because I had a bunch of these players that, but to be honest, I don't even know why I bought them in the first place, because they weren't going to be getting good for me at D3, and I wasn't really playing D2. So I have, I've made some mistakes over the years with super rares that I have acquired, hoping that they would get better. They did not get better, but now is their time to shine. That's their time to pay off the fee that I invested in them with a couple of $200 thresholds.
Yeah, lovely.
Have you gone out? Look, have you bought anyone with capped in mind, or are you just looking to use the depth that you already have?
I did make a purchase this morning with capped in mind, actually. Igor Postonsky from Varazdin. He's had a leg break, a lovely little leg break. So yeah, that was quite a while ago now. So his L15 is still high because he's fast player, takes all their set pieces, etc. So his L15 is still 62, but I don't expect him to be back for another few weeks. And obviously they come back in 338, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I think Croatia does. So I don't really expect him to be back then. So I think he needs to get another 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. So he needs another 4 DMPs. So that means anything back from game week 3, 4, 3, I believe. I'll be able to use him with a DMP 0, and I don't really expect him back much before sort of middle of February. Nice. So I think that should be fine. So yeah, I picked him up. He's like 0. I actually paid like way more than I wanted to. Some other guy ran the auction up, but it was like 60 quid or something. So not for a rare. So nothing to break the bank.
I think it was for a super rare then. I was like, are the days of super rare bargains over with the new auto bidding that will undoubtedly come across from NBA at some point?
Yeah, I actually did. One of his super rares did go really, really cheap. One of the guys, who is this chap? Hang on 1 second. But there was a super rare that was auctioned recently, 27 days ago. Mr. Proper, he seems to know something about old Igor because he's got like 3 rares and the super rare. He got the super rare for 0.09, so that seems a good pickup there. He is like a legit smasher when he's playing. I don't like he takes all the set pieces for Varazdin and is a really good player.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? It's like if you can get that DMP 0, L15 0 super rare.
Yep.
In the week that you can play them, the first week
back, really, basically, yeah.
No, but also as well is if you think about it, you got your. That should if you manage to not hit threshold with a DMP player that plays, then there's something gone horribly wrong.
Yeah, it's like almost like a penalty kick, really, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, so then it's like, okay, well, you should get your sort of $200 out of it from that 1 week, and then realistically, say the podium gets T1 super rares,
right?
Completely making this up, but
sure.
Your upside in capped super rare for that 1 week that you can drop in the DMP 0 is pretty significant. So actually then it just creates just what I quite like about it is because it gives value to super rares. For ages, if you didn't have the big dog super rares, then there wasn't really any use for them, right? Yeah, that's why sort of specialist rare just stank, because you'd win a T2 super rare and you'd be like, oh, brilliant, nobody wants it. Whereas now there will be those weeks where somebody will want those players. Like if they've got a good performance, they fit that person's team cap, they've got a chance of outperforming that L15, and then there is sort of demand for that. What I find really interesting and what I'm really, really excited to see is how many people take capped super rare seriously?
Yeah, I think in that
how many managers on the game will play that with any sort of degree of priority?
Yeah, I'm guessing the mega whales will stick their leftovers in there, is like what I presume. But then their leftovers are probably still going to be as good as my first choice super rares, I suppose. But yeah, I think I also wonder how I think lots of people will use it just to try and farm that bit of that bit of Ethereum, basically. But we'll see. Like I said, I think that'll be completely dictated by the price structure.
Yeah.
Another good player I have actually is Ivan Neverstitch, assuming that Dominik Livakovic leaves this window, which I think surely he has to, right? I hope he does, because I sold mine.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seemed to, like, the rumours really heated up, didn't they? And it seemed like he was a dead cert gone in January, and then it's gone quiet again. So you might have to wait for August for Neverstitch to be your cap mode hitter. But yeah, I just think there's a lot at the moment, isn't there? Like, what I find quite interesting is not just teams going for players that did well in the World Cup, but there also seems to be like increased visibility on like Argentine and Croatian players as a result of the World Cup. Like, I know that was it Orsic was linked to Southampton, but then they've had the bid rejected. Like, it appears to be there's a lot of like clubs that are in January going, oh shit, we need some people. Oh God, where do we look? And they've gone, oh, Croatia did well at the World Cup. Let's have a look at their best teams. Or, oh, what can we get from Argentina? Like, it seems to be, it's a funny one there. And then also as well, like, we could get people going the other way. These people, these players that, maybe are subs at a champion Europe team that drop down to a challenger team or even go to the MLS. Like, there could be some absolute cap mode superstars that come out of the January transfer window.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm going to try and keep my finger on the pulse. Like, there's one more player I want to buy for my summer global all-star D3 lineup, but then after that, I'm actually seriously considering, sort of trading limiteds around cap.
That's
to those sort of L15 zeros, because they're fairly predictable, right?
Yeah.
Like you could grab a handful of Nico Mantles, tuck him away until the end of February, knowing that when that game does come, he's going to be the keeper to have in limited for that particular week. So I feel that that's, the way I sort of see it at this moment in time is that I will play rare. Rare will be the one that I sort of can play most seriously because of the depth I have in my gallery. Super rare, I will play when it makes sense to play. Like, I won't just sort of blindly go in every week. I will look at the matchups and be like, okay, do I think that this week I have a chance? If not, I'll sort of roll them into a D2 side, or I'll, break them up into sort of two D3 sides. Rare is the one I take seriously. I'm honestly considering whether or not I play limited or trade limited. Because if you think of that limited, it's $5 a week, unless you have a smash a week and hit an upside. You could probably make more than that trading, to be honest. If you've got something to play with from the beginning. So, I agree with you that the prizes will make all the difference. But yeah, I think that there is a fairly sort of predictable trading strategy that you could employ around these
around the game weeks.
Yeah.
I think the sort of the Moneyball way so rare have turned the mode like they've done with the NBA. It's all like NBA is mad, isn't it? It's all just find the best projected lineup on so rare and buy on so rare data and buy the players, right? Is basically what I don't play NBA, but that's what I'm told is like.
I play the common version, right? And I do zero research each week other than logging into my Sorare data lineup builder and filtering by who's expected to outperform their L10. And I go, okay, you're in my team, you're in my team, you're in my team, you're in my team, submit. And yeah, but people obviously do that. But then when they're looking at it and they're actually playing for real, is they're going, okay, well, this guy's expected to outperform his L10 by 20 points. I'm having him. And they'll go and buy the limited of that, and it just spirals. So what's interesting, though, is, MBA, they have these projections in place in partnership with RotorWire. There's not really that in football at the moment. So I'm intrigued to see if we see the same, accentuated to the same degree, the intensity of this is the player that I want.
Yes,
because if we don't have that clear projection and that ranking of this is the best guy for that week, then it will require a little bit more research. And anything that requires a little bit more research means that there's fewer managers that are just going to look at a list and go, oh, boom, I want him. So I think that that's going to be the intriguing aspect to it, is how that sort of demand is influenced.
Yeah, with NBA, the scoring is more formulaic, isn't it? Obviously with like the points and rebounds and stuff.
Yeah,
and obviously,
and because they project their minutes as well, right? So like projecting of minutes for basketball is really common. So then what they're doing is projecting the minutes and then the average score and the opponent's strength. Whereas in football, it's really
so many more.
It's a lot more difficult to do that because of the way that decisives can add such a huge variance to the score.
Yeah.
But how have you thought about team composition in terms of position? The reason I say this is because whenever I used to hunt threshold on the old way, I always loved the double defender and double midfielder approach, because they would tended to be the more consistent players. Whereas now you kind of want a team of fullbacks and forwards, don't you? Because you just want you want that variance. I dropped a note to Laird the other day. I was like, can we get standard deviation as a filter on servo data? You've got the player finder feature where you actually can go through and say, oh, what's the average L15? Who's got to play a match in this game week? I was like, who's got a match in this game week and has a really high standard deviation from their L15? Because those are the players that you want. But the way I was sort of thinking about it is, you've got these players that have forwards that have 0 AA game, so they'll keep their L15 relatively low. But then when they get a goal or an assist, they will really spike.
Yeah.
So I've been almost leaning towards a double forward strategy, because I think the most important players in this game mode are going to be your forwards and your goalkeeper. Because if someone can grab a decisive, one decisive in your team makes it, right. Assuming everyone else maintains their L15, one decisive means that you've blown that cap out of the water. You're done. And if you get anything more than that, then you're challenging for top prizes. And I just thought that the sort of difference between L15 and upside is greater in goalkeepers and in forwards. Whereas defenders and midfielders tend to be a little bit more predictable. They tend to be a little. Their spread of scoring is far narrower.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably fair. I do think, obviously, when you get the defender that gets the DA, they've obviously got. You've got a higher chance of hitting a monster score rather than just a 60 with your forward, maybe. And obviously,
what's Owen Vindal's L15, mate? He might be a capped mode meta for the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, could be for sure.
You've got one, right?
I do, yeah, I do. His L15 is 48, so yeah, it could. I struggle to play any Ajax player with any confidence, to be honest. but yeah, you're right. And also, Wrench could also be the same, but I'm pretty sure he's injured again. His L15 is only 40, actually. I'm pretty sure he's injured again.
I went and I'm going to be following Ajax with you this remainder of the season, because, well, I hope I'm going to be following Ajax, because if he gets a transfer in the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be pissed. I grabbed myself an Edson Alvarez card, but not the current card, Josh, the old one, which was a defender, which means that when he gets those juicy clean sheet bonuses, the player will get it, but it won't be represented in his L15, because his current L15 is as a midfielder. So I'm all in on Edson Alvarez, because if you look at the difference between variance of his midfielder score and his defender scores has much higher peaks. So I'm quite looking forward to playing him in spots where he plays against Emmen, and you would hope that Ajax keep a clean sheet, but they seem to be allergic to them in the last couple of months. So I'm hoping they can refine form, because I think some of these out of position players, where their eligibility will be calculated based on the current position score, but you will be able to claim the score of the card that you own. I think that they can be quite fun. Rio Hatate is another one. I grabbed him in limited because his defender score obviously gets clean sheet bonuses. His midfielder score does not. So I think that could be quite exciting, is having a couple of these players that you can just use in good spots for your cap mode, because they the upside of these different position cards can be pretty strong.
Yeah, it also looks like Ajax are going to sign Geronimo Rulli from Villarreal. And you know, one thing I've just realised, I was just looking at Geronimo Rulli's player page. Guess who on So Rare bought a Geronimo Rulli Super Rare 4 months ago?
It wasn't one of the Ajax boys, was it? Was it Daley Blind?
Davy Klaassen.
Was it Klaassen? There we go, confirmed. This is hot off the press. Fabrizio Romano, eat your heart out. You do not need to do any journalistic work. You just need to follow what Klaassen and Blind are doing on their So Rare teams.
I mean, he's way ahead of the curve. Like 4 months ago, obviously suggests they were also in from in the summer, maybe.
Wow.
But yeah, so that move looks like it's going crazy.
So Josh, I'm not going to publish this for a couple of hours. So make your Rulli purchase now. What's Rulli's L15, Josh?
Yeah, that's a good.
Probably higher than Pastia's, to be
fair. He didn't play the last one, did he? He's got loads of benches because it's 55. Yeah, Pastia's is 29 currently. So.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Heard it here first. Who else has Klaassen been buying? Hopefully not a left back, because otherwise Vindar's in real trouble.
No, his most recent purchase is actually Dominik Livakovic. Funnily enough, I'm presuming that was to play the World Cup. Oh, wow, he won a Mohamed Salah 2 months ago as well. Sergio Roberto, he bought. Who knows?
Hello. we need a So Rare data watch list for this. Pro player purchases. Yeah, well, there we go. Do you want to? It's such an odd signing.
Yeah, very strange.
I really of all the goalkeepers that I like to go after, I don't get it. I mean, I can understand why Villarreal are selling, because they've got, was it Iker Alvarez and Philip Jorgensen, who both pretty decent young prospects. And do they still have Reina?
They do. He played the last game.
Okay. So yeah, I guess they have plans to bring through one or both of those young players, but it's just a strange one for Ajax, really.
Yeah,
isn't it? You always associate with Ajax with bringing through young players, and then it's like, oh, we're just going to get another really quite old goalkeeper coming to the end.
Yeah, I suppose he's only 30, but I do agree. I think it seems like quite a safe signing. I do worry salary implications for Ajax. Like, obviously, he's not going to be. I don't imagine he's going to be cheap moving from Villarreal. But
no. But if he gives us more clean sheets, we're all there for the clean sheet bonuses. Essentially, what Pasveer has done is just thrown a couple of games because he knew that captain mode was coming, and David Klaassen told him all about it, and he said, "Look, lad, we just need to bring that L15 down a little bit, and then we're just going to clean up."
So then we can all start feasting when you're dropped. Yeah,
absolutely. Players are going to eat well for the next couple of months.
Back versus NEC this weekend, Tex. So I do actually have some nice lineups this weekend, or theoretically nice. Yeah. Theoretically nice, anyway.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this weekend for a while. It's got Eredivisie back. We've got Belgium back. I've got some. Fingers crossed, decent looking teams. I've been doing quite well for the last couple of weeks, but I keep on winning T1s with points totals that probably really shouldn't be getting T1s, but because it's been some fairly light weeks, I am worried that that's given me a little bit of a false sense of security, and I'm coming into this weekend, thinking, yes, I've got this. I've got my strongest teams. I can do really well, and then. Seeing your team that you're sticking out in, maybe Challenger, D3, maybe All-Star, Rare, Pro. I'm I'm now not feeling so confident. So let's see what this weekend brings. I'm actually, for the first time in months, I'm putting a specialist super rare team in. It's been a long
Ooh.
time, but I bought coffee thinking with an eye on capped, and then I realised that coffee has an L15 of 39, and having
nice.
a keeper that fits into that under 40 slot on specialist just feels like an opportunity not to be wasted. So I'm using him and Jesper Darland as my facilitators, and then dropping a couple of my super rare guys in, because I've got some questions around Van Kronbrugge, some questions around Carlos Cuesta, who both missed the last game. So normally I would have gone under 23 D3 and challenger D3, but
Right.
I've got a question on some of the rare cards that I've got. So I was like, actually maybe specialist makes sense. The other one is Adrian Treble is somehow got an L15 under 40. So I've dropped him in my specialist rare as well. So I've got some exciting teams for this week. Hopefully. But normally, whenever I get excited going into a game week, it ends up with disappointment. So
Egg on your face, mate.
Egg on the face. But yeah, I think I'm bringing it back to Cap. I am quite excited for Cap, but I do think even it's just you're not going to be able to hit it as regular frequency as you did with All-Star, the sort of the historic threshold. So I am, although I talk about depth and knowing the importance of depth, I don't think it's really sunk in how much depth that you're going to need to play it regularly, particularly at super rare, right? Like how often super rare, like you look at it and you think, oh yeah, $200 of ETH, like that's a brilliant win for 1 week, but what's realistic for that? Like if you win it once a month, I certainly don't think you're not going to be hitting it every week, right? Unless you've got like 100 super rares. But then what's the interesting thing there is, like, say there's 50 prizes. Do 50 managers hit threshold? Like, is there a scenario where you might not get threshold, but you might get one of the bottom tier prizes because it's a midweek and 20 managers can actually put out a super S side that's actually capable of doing anything?
Yeah, quite possibly. I was just actually having a look back through my Challenger Europe Super Rare entrance in before the World Cup, and like on quite a few of these, and this is with no cap, bear in mind, and a unique playing quite a lot of the time. I don't get over 250 points. So yeah, this, I think, like you say, I think Super Rare is going to be really tough to like consistently hit that. Actually, I do get probably like 80% of the time I do get over 280. But yeah, like I say, it's with no cap and
captain and XP.
A captain and XP and a unique playing. Yeah, so how many times I'd actually hit? That's actually a really good point, because like quite a lot of them I'm just scraping like 300 or just over 300. So without the XP and captain, that's not going to be enough, right?
No.
So yeah,
but I think this is why like I've tried to grab a couple of Argentinian League super rares, because there will be. I already had some already. So even before Cap was announced, I had, I'd say, 3 strong super rares from Argentina. So then the way I'm looking at it is I'm going, okay, well, there's going to be these odd weeks where it's just Argentina. I'll use those super rares mostly, that they're the core, they're the foundations of my America Rare Pro and my global Rare Pro teams.
Right.
But they're all from Copa Libertadores teams. So there's going to be these weeks where Copa Libertadores is playing and it's only a handful of teams, but America will be open. Cap Super Rare will be open. I feel like there's potentially an opportunity to hit decent returns, because you think about it, right? If, there is such, the returns in Super Rare Cap are really good.
Yeah.
before you even think about the prizes. Like, $200 of ETH for 1 week is a decent return. But you feasibly don't need to win it that often to put in a positive return on your investment, which I think is quite exciting. And then if you've got the opportunity to sort of win some more depth as you go, then it gives you that choice and the options to to actually sort of maybe win twice a month, for example, or slightly more. So, and this is it. We're talking about it from a super perspective. Obviously none of us are really playing at unique, but like unique capped. Like, how many people are going to be able to play that? Like, it's going to be like 7 managers that can actually, that have got that sort of level of unique. This is Pavel's tournament. Unique. Capped.
It is. Yeah.
He's been waiting for this for years.
That,
yeah.
I don't know how many uniques he has, but must be lots.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Like, this is, he's got 216. I mean, I doubt all of them are eligible.
How many players have got red X's on them?
Yeah, there'll be quite a few, but still, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, nice. Did you have any other thoughts on Capmo? I think we maybe have covered it. I guess, like I say, just to quickly summarize, I'm just sort of hitting for depth and trying to sort of pick players that outperform their L15s, which I guess everyone is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is the biggest tactic for me, I guess.
For me, I quite like it because I try to play under 23 with a bit of priority, also America and Challenger, and I think in those leagues, you can win players that are, just breaking in, or you can grab players that have just got to transfer down, right? I don't play Champion Europe. Nobody gets to transfer down to Champion Europe, right? But there's players that I think would, if I can grab like an under 23. So I bought Patrick Valamark the other day of Feyenoord. His L15 is trash. It's so low. But what's interesting is he's changed from a midfielder to his forward. So he'll now I can use him as a forward. His L15 going forward will be his forward score. But what's showing at the moment is his what he scored as a midfielder. And he also wasn't really starting, but he sort of seems to have impressed the coach. He seems to be in a position now where he's going to be a more regular starter. Valamark is someone that I can absolutely use in my under 23 sides, but for a couple of weeks while his L15 is low, then he's someone that I can roll into my capped rare side. And I think that's the really, for me, yes, it's finding these players that are going to outperform, but for me, I don't think it can be overstated the risks associated with trading in and out on a regular basis. So what I'm trying to do is when I'm making these decisions of players that I'm like, oh, they could be useful for capped, I'm like, they could be useful for capped and if it's not, they can be useful for capped and I'm kind of staying away from them, particularly at rare and super rare, because then otherwise I'm going to end up having a bunch of depth that I actually just can't use anywhere else once their L15 rises. Yep. Because ideally, right, you're grabbing players, like you shouldn't be grabbing players just because they've got a low L15. Like you're making a bet on them improving their L15. Like the worst thing you could possibly do in this scenario is just go out and buy random depth. And because you're probably going to weaken your other side, you're going to be left with a bunch of cards that are really not that valuable to you week in, week out. And if they don't actually improve their L15, they're going to suck for capped as well.
Yep.
So, where I've been, trying to make these purchases is, yes, trying to identify these players that can outperform their L15. And I think that, for me, it's that they've either got like a position change that impacts their scoring potential, they've moved club, they've been injured, or they've been a bench warmer and they're about to become a starter. Like that to me is like the 4 broad categories. Oh, actually, no, 5. They're like Denzel Dumfries and they're either shit or amazing. Like there is no in between. Like there's 5 broad categories of like how players will outperform their L15. But then for me, it's like I don't just want to buy a bunch of those for no reason. Like I'm trying to employ a bit of strategy to it so that I'm just not left holding the bag on a load of cards that just won't be useful for me in normal gameplay. And I think that's like a huge caveat for me, is like thinking of that scenario of like, once this player gets better, how can I use them? Or if I don't plan to use them, do I have an exit route for them? And I think the exit route comes a lot easier in limited, because there's just more managers playing, it's lower denominations, like the liquidity is just so much better in limited. But I think if you're a rare manager and you're either like buying a threshold team, and I say that as in like 5 players, and you think that's going to cut it, it's not. Or if you're a rare manager and you're going, oh, I just better buy some depth for capped, and you're not thinking about when you could use that player, you know, do they have fixtures in the same game week? You know, what are the fixtures like? Because, you know, ideally you want players that are going to hit in the same game week. Otherwise, you know, if you've got, you know, if you say you get a bunch of these high variance players, they use Denzel Dumfries as an example, they're great if you can pick the week that they're gonna smash.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got 5 high variance players in the lineup,
you need some stability.
It's you know, you could get 3 guys smash, 2 guys don't, and still not hit the cap, right? You still not hit the threshold. So I think the way that I'm sort of thinking about it is tactical depth. Can I use it? When do I plan to use it in my cap side? And I think that's why these like players coming back from injury, or players that have an L15 of 0 are great, because they're injured and they're not playing now, which means that you can essentially buy them a little bit cheaper because there's lower demand. You can use them that 1 week they come back, and then if they've become a starter and they're a half decent player, then the idea is that they would have utility afterwards, that either you could use them or someone else would want to use them afterwards. So I think that that's what for me is like how that I will try to approach it, is stack up a bunch of these coming back from injury players, just sort of put them in the icebox for a while, and then like wait for them to come back, and then just look and see what I've got in my gallery that can complement them. I think, you know, the danger is just going all in on capped and using all the ETH on capped mode, having a bunch of ETH tied up in players that just don't really help your lineups elsewhere. Because, you know, if it's a decision whereby you're saying, you know what, actually say you've got, you know, half an ETH to spend, do you improve your all-star rare side, or do you build a cap side?
Yeah.
Right. Not that I actually think you could build a cap side in rare for 0.5 ETH, because you're going to need a goalkeeper, right? It's not going to happen. But there will be fewer people in all-star rare, in theory, right? Mm-hmm. There will be people that will have to make it, that only have 1 goalkeeper, that have to make a decision on whether they continue to play all-star rare or they go for capped. So in theory, there'll be less competition in all-star rare. And I think that, you know, capped is like shiny and great, but if you don't have existing depth in your gallery that you're like, oh, great, I was waiting for a chance to use that absolute shitter that I've been holding for months and should have sold, then you've got to make a real decision on how you invest in your ETH, because you are going to have to keep adjusting that team. And I think that's the sort of thing that has to really be thought about, is not just depth for the sake of depth. But yeah, I don't know. We shall see. But I think like it's going to require a different, slightly tailored approach per scarcity as well, if you're someone that is trying to tackle multiple scarcities. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one to see. Watch this space. We'll have to check back in 2 months' time and see. You know, we could be like, oh, just crap, and I can't stop it. Or we could be like, yeah,
I'll definitely.
Either that, or you're going to be making bank in Super Rare, Josh, and you're going to be like, look at what I won. It's probably going to be the former rather than the latter, isn't it? But we shall wait and see. Anyway, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. We will have to do this again and get back into the pod on a more regular basis. But for now, thank you ever so much for tuning in.